Hi, friends. This is Dr. Arpita Gupta Dipalma, and you're listening to my podcast, From Pissed Off to Poised. This show is for busy women physicians and professionals just like you who are ready to take control of their emotions while learning how to excel in juggling all the things they are responsible for in life. It's for overextended mamas who are trying to figure out how to work smarter, not harder. It's for multitasking women who are tired of playing the role of the angry and resentful air traffic controller, who simply want to learn how to create a life that is more calm, intentional, and joyful for themselves. My goal is to help you learn how to eliminate the overwhelm and maintain your composure in high-stress situations that you face with the demands in your day-to-day life. Because I get you guys, this was totally me. You are not alone. I invite you to embark on your journey of transformation with me. Enjoy the listen. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of From Pissed Off to Poised. I am super, super excited because today I am doing a guest episode, which you know I don't do very many of, but I handpicked this guest because she's quite frankly amazing and she's one of my teachers and I have learned so much from her. In my time with her, I've actually really significantly changed the way I approach my clients and how I work with them. And so I credit a lot of those learnings to Bev Aron. And like I said, I'm super excited to have her today. She is the founder of the Deep Dive Coach Certification Institute. And I'm going to let her kind of give you the details about her and her experience and what she has so that I don't butcher anything. But welcome, Bev. Thank you so much for joining me and agreeing to be on the show today.
Thank you, Arpita. I feel extremely honored to be one of your select guests and honored to have worked with you over these past few years. I have been a life coach for about 14 years and started off with a very cognitive type of cerebral coaching. And over the years, through my own experiences, healing from personal trauma and crises and observing my clients and what they need, have moved more into, as you said, the deep dive coaching method, which includes very heavy emphasis on our emotions, processing our emotions, really learning to connect with our bodies, where they lie. And it has turned really into a healing process from many of the emotions that we often feel out of control of, to understanding them, being able to manage them, and live a life where we don't see them as a problem anymore.
So good. It's so true. And, you know, this podcast, the audience it's variable. Like there's a lot of physicians and there's a lot of just women professionals and stay-at-home moms. And I will say, though, coming from the physician background, we have very effectively learned to not feel our feelings. And so I think that was one of the biggest things when I started this journey for myself, is starting to recognize that, oh, this is something in my body that's not peaceful, not at ease. What does that actually mean? Because we shut it off as physicians. We have to shut it off. We're taught to shut it off so that we can kind of just stay on task and handle the situation and take care of the patients and do the things. So I guess I want to just dive in and just ask you, tell me, you know, this podcast, a lot of it is about anger and learning about teaching about anger and how it can show up in different ways. So I think I would just love to get your perspective on the emotion of anger.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And to relate back to what you were saying about physicians, I think it's very common in the world that, especially as women, certain emotions that make us behave in a certain way, we're taught they're wrong, and then we internalize that. We make ourselves wrong. And then sometimes we will take learnings from self-help that tell us we're fully in control of our emotions to make ourselves even more wrong. And so I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because I think my thinking of anger has evolved. In the beginning, when I started out coaching and understood that our thoughts cause our feelings, I did think, oh, anger is, you know, it's a bad emotion because it makes me do bad things. And I could just think different thoughts and not feel angry. That felt kind of self-violating. And over the years, what I've come to realize is, and learn from other teachers, anger is a very valid emotion. The first thing that I learned from one of my teachers, Bonnie Badenoch, that I love, anger means we are alive. And I love that idea. Yes. And then, you know, following on from that, it means something has gone wrong in our world. Either personal violation or invasion or community, societal, cultural. And so it's a sign for us. When I'm feeling anger, something is not right, and I want to get that message from myself. I want to acknowledge it and see it. I think where there's some confusion is that rage is a more out of control emotion that is a result of possibly being triggered by past traumas or unhealthy ways of communicating anger. And that is different. So we want to really be able to distinguish those for ourselves, which is anger, which feels valid and is telling me something important to me is not being upheld. Right. And which is rage, which is just me being completely out of control.
And I think that brings up a good point. There's a spectrum in terms of the emotion of anger where, an extreme is rage. Anger can be a variable amount in between. And then just frustration or irritation or annoyance is kind of on the lower end of the scale. And so starting to be able to recognize where you are on the scale, the emotion might be there, but the behaviors that result because of the emotion, part of that is also how we are handling the emotion, how we are accepting and noticing and acknowledging the emotion in our body, and then what we do to take care of ourselves when we have it. So part of that, I think I've talked about this in some of my episodes where anger is a secondary emotion, that a lot of times we kind of jump to anger because we know how it's going to feel. We know how it's going to end up when we show up that way.
Yep.
And that honestly feels more safe and comfortable to us than feeling some of these other negative emotions that we might be avoiding feeling by jumping to anger instead. So that's one thought of how anger has developed. Another thought is that anger is a primary emotion. Like that is the emotion that we're feeling. Tell me a little bit about what your thought is, and maybe you have a little bit of belief in both and what differentiates it.
Yes. Okay. I love it. Yes. So when we think of it as a secondary emotion, usually, as I'm sure you've explained to your leaders, it's because what's really coming up for us feels very vulnerable and possibly weak, like it could be powerlessness or shame or humiliation. And we don't like to feel those feelings in our society. It makes us want to sort of crumple. And so then we find an emotion like frustration or irritation or blame that makes us feel sort of stronger and has us behave in a way that weakens our impact or weakens our relationship. So I think the way that we understand it is we want to learn what do the different ones feel like in our body. Because anger that comes from a cause of ours can often feel strong but flexible. It can have us feeling our most capable. Whereas rage or frustration or irritation or the secondary emotion of anger can make us feel very rigid and very reactive. So it's like we become rigid and then we sort of become almost like a cannon and we just like fire, fire, fire. Whereas true anger, this is an injustice. This is me noticing my aliveness will feel less urgent, will feel very important.
Right.
But I think a lot of what we call anger is actually the secondary emotions that you're describing, sort of compensations.
Exactly.
And those feel out of control for us.
Yeah, I think it's important to just notice that, once we start doing this work, that anger is our body's way of alerting us that, as you mentioned, something is off, something is wrong. There's been an injustice, there's been a violation, and kind of diving deep into figuring out what that is. In essence, whenever you have anger, it is almost like there is a secondary emotion underneath of that feeling violated or whatever that we have to explore to kind of get to the root of the anger.
Yes.
It kind of, I feel like, is very much so tied together. It's hard to separate and differentiate that anger might be the primary emotion that you feel first until you do the work to further explore. So
I totally agree with you. And the work is learning what it feels like in my body and the different ones. It's less important what we call it. It's what we learn from it and how we respond to it.
Yes,
in the world.
100%. So how do you suggest, like for clients that show up with either very reactionary 0 to 100 miles per hour anger reactions, start to make a change, or how to kind of like have more awareness when they're encountering these real-time situations that set them there, and then what to do when they are finding themselves to have that embodiment of the anger, the activation in their systems?
Oh, beautiful question. Okay, so many things. First thing is, one of our missions at the Deep Dive Coach Institute is to never use this work against yourselves. So let's say you're angry a lot, you yell a lot, you do whatever, you hit and scream. The first thing is never, ever make yourself wrong. Whatever you were doing, even a response that caused impact that you really would have preferred not to have, you were always doing it from what was available to you at the time, your best resources, your best thinking. So after, you always want to be able to treat yourself with compassion. It's not just to be like sweet and loving. It's because if we shame ourselves and turn the anger on ourselves after, we're more likely to do it again. Because whatever we focus on is what we'll do more of. So that's the first thing. If we move backwards from whatever way you react to your anger, if you don't love it, you don't have to love it. You just want to be understanding towards yourself. So that's the first thing. Then we want to learn from it. One way that I really love to do is go back and rewind that event. When was the moment I felt that first smoldering? That's what I want to learn. What happened there? What was there something that I needed to pay attention to that I didn't? Was there something that was said that triggered something in me? That's where all our self-awareness comes. Then we start to understand ourselves, because we can't be in anger and awareness at the same time. And so the more we develop the skill from the past, the more we are able to actually do it in the moment. We're sitting in the meeting, somebody says something and we feel the smoldering. We become able in that moment to observe ourselves and develop awareness. Even if it's as simple as, I'm feeling some smoldering, something's going on here. I don't have time to figure it out in this meeting. I just have to get through the meeting, but I just know something has been awakened in me. And that just makes us feel aware, and therefore we can't be angry at the same time. In the minute, we just want to develop ways. One way is to, if there is a risk of you behaving in a way you don't want to behave, is to just tell yourself, I don't have to do anything at this moment.
There's no urgency to respond.
There's no urgency to respond. Exactly. And then it just sort of, again, brings the tone down, brings you to awareness. So there is a technique that I learned that is a tiny part of a process called The Journey by Brandon Bays, and I call it layering to home. And you can do this in a meeting, in a tense situation, or you remove yourself. And, I always just suggest to my clients, go to the bathroom. It's very easy escape. And what you do is you just say, what am I feeling right now? Angry. And you imagine yourself in a lake of anger and you dive below it. What's under anger? And then there might be fury. Okay, in the lake of fury, dive below fury. What's there? Shame, blame, whatever. And you keep diving down. And I'm sure, Peter, you'll agree with me, you always reach a level of calm, peace, if you keep going, because that is who we are. And then you open the door, you go back in the meeting. It's a whole different meeting.
Yes, 100%. I remember we did this at one of our workshops together.
Right.
It was super powerful because initially you fall under the primary emotions, like the negative emotion that's underneath. And then once you start to go deeper underneath that, you get to that place of calm, of peace, like how to get to settle ourselves back into that layer. So super powerful exercise. And I'm going to just put a little caveat there is that, of course, we are not promoting that if anybody is in a situation where there's any harm or whatever, that we are just acknowledging it and just being okay with it. By no means are we saying that. We are referring to when we make ourselves wrong for feeling anger and maybe showing up in a way where we're yelling, but obviously not when there's any harm to any other individuals or to ourselves. If that's the case, then obviously we want to get additional help and look for additional resources.
And just do whatever you need to do to defend yourself. Yes. Thank you.
Exactly. So I have another question for you. tell me what you feel the role of emotional intelligence is with regards to understanding and managing the anger. Because I think
Mm,
that does play a factor with this, and not to make anybody wrong, but to also understand what the role is. And then if we need to grow that, how do we do it?
mm, mm. Well, I love this question. So I'm definitely not an expert in emotional intelligence or the idea. If we think of it as how educated or aware or familiar we are with our own emotions and the emotions of others, because there is an interplay, then I would say it has a role in our awareness of our anger and therefore our ability to manage it, and also our ability to know what do I need from the environment and from the other people in order to manage this most effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm not sure it's the idea of just sort of being born with it, but an ability to grow our emotional intelligence by taking on a practice that makes us more aware of what emotion we're experiencing at any time. So we sort of grow our vocabulary, we grow our repertoire, and we grow our ability to manage it.
Totally. I mean, I think once we start to kind of pause and settle and reflect more, the
Mm-hmm.
more awareness we start to build with it. And I think that is what grows our
Yes.
emotional intelligence, right? Because otherwise, we're
Yes.
just showing up from full reactionality, if that's a word. I don't even know. But
Yeah.
we're showing up,
Yeah.
we're not really present. We're just kind of showing up with fury or anger or rage, however it's presenting itself. So,
Yeah. And
uh,
however we've done it and however we saw it done.
yes. One of the other things that I think that I touch upon a lot is that, how trauma has impacted us. And I know you, as you mentioned, you're a student of Bonnie Badenoch, which her
Mm-hmm.
courses are amazing. I've also
Yes.
participated in that. And one of
Wonderful.
the things that I found super interesting is this research showing that trauma can be carried down intergenerational up to 14
Mm-hmm.
cell lines worth of generations. And
Yeah.
that honestly blew my mind because I come up with scenarios where I'm like, something doesn't feel right here, but I don't really understand why. And,
Yes.
one of the things I actually was just speaking to somebody else about this earlier is that this insecurity around potentially male figures in our life, specifically
Mm,
strangers who are males. And
mm,
nothing has never happened in my life
mm.
that I'm aware of and to any of my family members that I'm aware of, but
Yeah.
that intense fear to keep us safe is there for
Yes.
me. And so, can you talk a little bit about that with regards to how past traumas might show up for us, even though they might not have directly been primary, secondary, or vicarious trauma, even for us,
Mm,
but they still
mm.
show up because of our ancestry?
Yes. So the first idea that I'm going to give us is I'm so glad you brought up trauma because very often, whether it's our own trauma or past generations, if we are triggered from a trauma, our response will look like anger. And it's not anger, it's triggering. And so for us to learn to recognize that, because then we're reacting to the person as if we're angry, when in fact, it's a trigger from something that happened maybe 10 years ago, maybe 100 years ago.
Right.
So for us to have that awareness and to be able to know afterwards, that wasn't anger that we need to have a conversation about and we need to discuss. That was me being triggered. So let me just recover from my trigger and you recover from my outburst. But this wasn't about that. Like, it wasn't me being angry with what happened. So powerful to know that.
Yeah.
As far as generational trauma, I have experienced this actually as you know, in deep dive coaching, we do, very deep processing of sometimes memory, sometimes emotions. And I've experienced personally and with other clients, sometimes the image is of a long, long line of women that are recognized as grandparents, aunts, mothers, and then on and on and on. Sometimes what comes up is an experience that isn't from this life, but feels like it's ours. And so it's interesting you say that there's actually, writings about 14 generations. And one idea I want to offer that was offered to me by a therapist, which I love, is we can see ourselves. She said to me, you are here to heal the generational trauma. It's a very powerful way rather than feeling, sort of bogged down by, oh my gosh, not only my trauma, now I have to carry, 14 generations of women. We can see ourselves because we're living in such an enlightened age as we have the ability, if we heal this, to heal all the lines before us.
Yes. So powerful. And that
Mhm.
strikes a chord right now too for me. But
Does
it
it?
does. It makes complete sense. And it's releasing the fear of what might happen because of what's been ingrained in us or what's been passed down to us, and having the ability to be here to heal that generational trauma. It's super, super powerful.
Yes.
I think very much so real. It's
Mhm.
being able to have that awareness about it is important.
I love that you said it makes sense, because another thing we get to offer ourselves once we have this understanding is, oh, it might make sense that I'm doing this, even though I'm not sure why. And
Right.
then again, that takes us to awareness and out of the shame and out of the response to our reaction to being triggered, which looks like anger.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So good. I want to ask you, if you had an interaction with a person or a client or someone that's just beginning their journey with starting
Mm.
to make some changes around their anger reactions, what
Mm.
advice would you give them on how to
Mhm.
start and where to start?
Okay. So what I would tell them is, this makes sense. Go and find how it makes sense. Making yourself wrong, as we talked about, it's going to only make it worse. Approach yourself from the belief that it makes sense, and imagine yourself as being this, like, sort of, there's this very wise, aware you sort of hovering above you, and let them help you learn how it makes sense. Whether journaling helps or just sitting quietly or going for a walk, know that it makes sense and expect it to come to you, how it makes sense that you felt that, or had that awareness. I do think it's very helpful to have a guide with you on the way, a coach such as yourself or Peter, who can help people figure it out, because it's very hard to get out of our brain. But for those of your listeners who have that ability, some people have it naturally,
Mhm.
that's what I would enact. And then once it makes sense, then you get to understand it and you get to sort of be in it a little bit longer and stretch out the moments between the feeling and your response. And that's where all your ability is in those moments in between.
Oh,
I also think throughout this podcast, we've come up with so many tips that people can use. So a lot
100%.
of information. Yeah.
A lot of information packed in, but
Yep.
this has just been so good because I feel like it's just also constantly reminding ourselves of the tools and how to do the work. Because
Yes.
even myself, as I'm creating this show, going back and referencing some of the resources I've used, I'm like, oh yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of nice to resurface it in a sense by bringing it up and bringing up conversations with different people and looking at their perspectives, having them share their perspectives, because it could
Mhm.
resonate differently with different people and
Mhm.
impact different people, be absorbed better. So, but I
Yes.
truly appreciate this. I think one of the best things that I've learned during my time with you, and as I continue to be with you, is not making people wrong and just
Mhm.
allowing people to understand how everything that they are doing makes sense for them. It's so powerful, and it's a completely different approach to how, my initial trainings were, and a lot of people's initial
Mhm.
trainings were with how we work with clients. So it's truly beneficial for them. So
Mm.
so
Thank
I
you.
want you to tell people about how they can reach you, learn about your program, learn about
Mm.
you, because what you offer is truly a gift.
Thank you, Peter. Such a privilege. So my website is bevaron.com, bevaron.com. And people can go there and sign up I send out weekly emails with a tiny tidbit of insight, very short. I send out a monthly video, again, very short, about how to take your work deeper. The best way really to learn with me is I have a deep dive club. It's like my entry level into all this work, where we do learning and coaching together in meetings, which Peter, you've been a part of, and feel so honored to have you. And it's not too much. It's very manageable chunks, but that's where you find community and learning and growth of, people like ourselves who want to become more emotionally aware and have our interactions be more aware based.
Yes. It's so good. I highly recommend it, especially for
Thank
people
you.
who really want to do some deep dive work on
Mm.
emotional processing and memory work. Her program is great. And I'm still actually part of it as well because the learning continues. It continues and it continues. So,
Yes, I think one of the things you've said, that reminding yourself of these resources and going through it, this work does have to be a practice. We have to constantly be wanting to grow and actively doing it in some way or another.
well, thank you, Bev. I truly appreciate this.
You.
It's been an honor to have you on the show, and I am very grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Arpita. It's an honor for me.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of From Pissed Off to Poised. Remember, transformation is a journey, not a destination. So enjoy the ride. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review From Pissed Off to Poised on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback supports my mission to get this podcast out to help other women physicians and professionals like you on their path to creating a more peaceful life with more intention and more joy. I enjoy reading every message I get with your input and feedback on my journey, so keep them coming. And if you have a friend who might enjoy the listen, please share this episode and show with them. Lastly, if you want to learn more about my coaching programs and course offerings, check out my website at www.thoughtworkmd.com. Feel free to reach out to me to learn more about investing in yourself through one-to-one coaching so you can start living the life you've always wanted. This show is for general educational and entertainment purposes only. Life coaching is not a substitute for therapy or medical treatment.